Hey everyone, and welcome to the African Conversation live on What's Your Story Africa. My name is Catherine Mwangi. Now, the African Conversation, which is TAC, is for Africans on the continent and in the diaspora who have ideas, expertise, and solutions that deserve to be part of a bigger conversation. Today, we are diving into education. Are we preparing Africa's children for the future? To explore this, I'm joined by a powerful panel from across Africa and the diaspora, bringing real-life experience, insight, and perspective from the education space. I have a co-moderator today, Polycarp Wekesa. He's an educator who will help us frame and anchor parts of this conversation as we go. So let's now begin by introducing our panelists. Okay, so let's play their profiles. If we can, at some point. Okay. There is Polycarp's profile, so let me just let you know a little bit about Polycarp. He is an international education leader, curriculum designer, former UWC senior leader. He brings a global education and whole child learning perspective across Africa and Asia Pacific. He has over 2 decades in international education. He's a former senior leader within the United World Colleges movement. He's experienced in curriculum design, faculty development, and mission-driven schools. He will be helping me co-moderate today and set the context in a few minutes. Let us also introduce you to our other members of the panel. This is Ms. Jackie Otula. She brings strategic school leadership, equity, and future-ready institutional transformation. She has over 2 decades in international education leadership. She's a former head of IB programs at M-Pesa Foundation Academy, and she led the establishment of 3 IB programs in under 2 years. Let's have our next panel introduction. As Dr. Benson Kairu brings a systems-level view of education, standards, access, and global recognition in Africa. He leads IB development and recognition across Africa, yes, and he's a former IB diploma program coordinator at Brighton College. He's a former principal of Nova Pioneer Tattoo Boys. We're so glad you're here, Dr. Kairu. Let's have our next panelist. That is Mike Mukasa, a highly esteemed veteran of the US Armed Forces. He brings the technology, cybersecurity, and future skills lens to the education conversation. He's a certified offensive security expert. He speaks to AI, online safety, digital learning, and infrastructure readiness. We are glad to have you, Mike. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Oumah Otienoh. And he brings in the classroom curriculum and assessment reality to the conversation. He's a full-time school teacher at Nia Girls High School. He's a KICD content developer, senior examiner, and revision author with KJSEA. And he trains teachers countrywide on CBE pedagogies. I think that's how you pronounce that. I should have done my research. And he's also a transformational life coach. So we're so glad to have you here, Mr. Otienoh Oumah. So I want to just give this now to you, my co-moderator, Polycarp Wekesa, to just set the framing for today's conversation. And there you go, Polycarp. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Catherine. And it's a great pleasure to have such a wonderful panel to explore this conversation around education on the continent. And so let's start with a simple, but I think urgent question. What future are we preparing African children for? Because the world they're entering is not the same as the world we were educated for. Statistically, by the year 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet will be African, and 1 in 3 people in the workforce will also be African. That means Africa will have the largest workforce in the world. That is an extraordinary potential. But here's the tension. Across the sub-Saharan continent, a significant proportion of 10-year-old children still struggle to read and understand simple text. At the same time, the World Economic Forum estimates that nearly half of today's jobs will be transformed by AI and automation within this decade. So we are facing two realities at once. Children who need stronger foundational literacy and numeracy, and secondly, a future that demands not just digital fluency, but also creativity, critical thinking, and adaptability, not to mention climate change, economic volatility, and AI that are already shaping how students learn and work. So the stakes are clear. Are we preparing children for exams or for uncertainty? Are we preparing them for compliance or for leadership? And are we preparing them for employment or for entrepreneurship? Because the future into which they're going will require more than just memorization. It will require ethical judgment, resilience, collaboration, and confidence to build solutions for African challenges. So today, to frame this conversation, we want to begin by asking a couple of questions. And the first question I'd like to put to Jackie, as a school leader, what does it really mean to prepare learners for the future? Over to you, Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you, Polycarp, and thank you, Catherine. Thank you for having me on this powerful platform and forum. I just want to add on to my introduction there that I'm currently in a very privileged position to be principal at Waterford Kamhlaba. It's one of the United World Colleges in Southern Africa. And it's such a privilege to be here. And I think just referencing the question there and the tension that Polycarp has described, I couldn't be in a more privileged position just confronting this reality that we are currently facing. And so I really don't think it's about, the question should not be about what schools teach, but it should actually gravitate and move towards who schools are enabling young people to become. Because we all know that, you know, if it's a question about leadership in school systems now, we are all familiar with aspects of budgets, we are familiar with aspects of policies, we are familiar with compliance, we are familiar with academic performance. And in fact, if you think about it, many of the schools will be very quick to flash their strategic objectives, and top on any strategic objective currently I've seen from many institutions is really academic performance. And I think we really need to come into a paradigm shift to think about what are schools enabling our young people to become in the present day in view of what the future holds. And you couldn't have spelt it more clearly and eloquently there, Wekesa, when you spoke about those tensions that are beginning to exist. So I think it is important to honor the fact that any school leader must actually think about the things that I have listed. But schools that will matter in the next 20 years will be led by people who can create cultures where people learn courageously. Leadership becomes less about controlling those systems and more about designing ecosystems, because we want to begin to ask the questions that are difficult to ask of any school leadership systems at present. How safe do we create our environments? Are people feeling safe to disagree? What voices are absent? Who is invited onto the table? Are we producing high performers or thoughtful leaders? Are students merely succeeding in our systems, or are they enabling them to change? So I think it is important for us to actually move from what is to what could be. And as a leader, it is important to really think about culture. What is culture in our current systems, and how are we defining and shaping cultures that will actually stand true to what schools could be in the near future? So I think let's think about culture before we think about operation, because operation, anybody can do operation, but culture is a tad bit difficult. And culture is the everydays of the things that we do on a day-by-day basis that cumulatively speak to how we are enabling systems to become better, how we are enabling our people to stand strong in the present moment and to confront the challenges that we know all schools are grappling with. We know, for instance, that if we are going to be worth our while as school leaders, we have to think about equity. We have to think about how are we looking at philanthropy, for instance, how are we enabling students who are not able to come into our systems, but who are more deserving to actually be able to come into our spaces and be able to have an equal opportunity to learn? How are we creating opportunities for our leaders and school teachers to be able to have the capacity that is necessary to confront the different things that they're grappling with in their everyday settings? How are we allowing for discourses that are difficult to actually emerge and enable students to feel that actually they are co-creators in this world that we want them to own? So it is important as leaders to step out of the comfort zone. Think about the things that matter, yes, things that make schools' operation systems work, but think about how can we leverage on that which is already existing to create opportunities, to create cultures that will be far-reaching when it comes to issues of making people become human, and thinking about how we can position them to be in a space where they can actually make our communities, our systems, our world better. So I think if you're asking about leadership, it is thinking out of the box. It's thinking about how we become culture creators and co-creators to be able to transcend the operational paradigm to get into another system that speaks to culture. Thank you, Wekesa.
Thanks, Jackie, for that thing. So yes, moving from what is and what could be, and the challenges with that, and you mentioned equity as one of the issues. Moving on, I would like actually someone to have everybody on the panel to make some input. Benson, what future are we preparing? What does this future look like? Benson?
Yes, thank you, Polycarp, and thank you, Catherine, and their fellow panelists for being here. I think when we look at what kind of future we are preparing the young people for, it is important for us to know that looking at it from the perspective of being in Africa, it is a future that is going to be very, very focused on Africa. And therefore, we should always remember that what is global and international to others is local to us, because when they are out there and looking at Africa, and that for them is interpreted as international. For us, what they are seeing as international is local to us, and we must be prepared for that kind of future. As you are framing that, Polycarp, and giving the statistics about the population and the demographics of this continent in the future, then you are thinking about schools and school ecosystems that are preparing children for a world that they are going to see themselves more in that world, in leadership, in entrepreneurship, more than probably are represented now. And they must not see that preparation for a future is preparation for a future of what they see as the Western civilization now. They should be aware that that world is going to shift and change, and that it is the continent of Africa that is going to welcome so many people who want to come to this thriving continent. And therefore, how must these students who are not going to be students at that time, how must they operate in that kind of world? How must they take leadership? And I think when I think about the historical implications and realities of what kind of experiences Africa has had, it is for our children to be ethical, and our children to know that they are going to hold leadership, and they need to wield that authority and power, because it will come to them in a very compassionate way, because we have seen what the opposite does to a civilization. So it is for them to think about how, when they are in positions of leadership, positions of influence, how they are going to wield that kind of influence so that it is positive, not just for Africa, but for the whole world. I think there is a temptation sometimes to forget that Africa has got so much to share and to give to the whole world. And I think those are the things that must be brought back. When Jackie is talking about building a culture in the school, and you look at some of the values that are identified and isolated, most of them will resonate with an African cultural upbringing. And that is what we need to be very aware of. And as students are thinking about leadership, but also as school leaders, as curriculum developers, we must be aware of that. We may not be able to characterize the future in minute sense, but we can see the direction it is moving into. We can see how populations are becoming very cautious, wanting to ring fence themselves into kind of identifiable communities, and we know what that would do in the future. So as we learn, as we prepare students, I think that's what we need to be very, very aware of. And I agree completely with Jackie that performance and students' grades are going to be important. But I think what is going to be very, very important, especially in a world that is dominated by AI, is ways in which we bring back our humanity. How does our humanity shine through the technology-dominated world, mechanization, a lot of robots and that kind of situation? How is our humanity going to shine through so that we are in a position to lead a more peaceful, a thriving kind of human society than even what we are experiencing now? Thank you.
Thanks, Benson. Interesting thoughts there. At this point, I'd like to bring in, a classroom practitioner, Oumah. So from, if we have Oumah in the studio.
No.
No, he's not here. Okay, so moving on then to cybersecurity. Are we downplaying the role of technology in education?
Thank you so much, Polly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Polly. And I also want to thank all my fellow panelists for your inputs. The question is, are we preparing our children for the future? Now, in terms of cybersecurity, I think we are still behind. Because when you look at the future, when you look at the things that are happening today, some of the things we are doing in our schools, the curriculum, the syllabus, the teachers themselves, sometimes people forget about the teachers. Are the teachers equipped with the right skill sets to give to the children who are in school or the students? You're going to find that so many times when you travel abroad or when you say you're going to migrate, you go to a country and all you have to start is afresh. And ask yourself, why did I do these things when I was back home? Or why didn't someone tell me that I had to do ABCD? You find that we're in classrooms, our children are having 20 subjects. None of those subjects is involving IT or technology from the grassroots. So what do we have to do? The governments have to come in and chip in to provide computers. Without computers in schools, the rest we are going to talk about is theory. And then you end up producing theoretical kids who cannot perform the actual jobs needed in cybersecurity. So we can say that the schools themselves and the administrators have to look into what's trending in the world today. If you're having AI, are we having data centers in our regions? Are the schools having access to computers? And are the schools having access to the internet? I'll give an example about India. 15, 18 years ago, India made an overhaul into their entire curriculum. They went global, they went into IT. Guess what? 7 years, 8 years, we started seeing 15-year-olds working as software engineers in Google, and it was all over the news. We've seen all business startups in the US here, all business startups in technology, 80%, if not 70%, have an origin from India. Why? Because the educators back there, they say, you know what? The world is moving fast. We need to move and we cannot stay behind. But I also want to focus more on the teachers themselves, getting training courses, IT training courses. It's funny because when I went to do my diploma, I started with a diploma in cybersecurity here in the US. One of my professors was a senior offensive security engineer, whom we call hackers. He was a senior hacker for IBM X-Force Red. I was impressed because I was being taught by an expert. Actually, he used to tell us in the classrooms he's building robust hackers. And yes, he did. So that kind of experience, we need to bring it to our schools. The teachers have to be trained. And then they will give the right courses into our children, and then we'll be preparing the children for the future. Thank you so very much.
Well said, well said. And yes, the question is, are contemporary teachers well equipped with the skill sets that they need to prepare our children for the future that we are speaking about? Now, at this point, let's bring in Oumah. Oumah, you sit at the center of what we may describe as teaching and curriculum development, assessment, teacher training. Knowing what we know today about AI, about technology, about climate change, what do you see as the biggest gaps between policy and classroom reality? Oumah? Oumah, can you hear me? Oumah? Okay, it looks like let's give Oumah some time to get back in, and I'll go back to Jackie. And the question is, we all work with kids and we work with colleagues. Jackie, do we think that what do we need to do to build these skill sets for our teachers to be able to deliver, to prepare our children appropriately for the future? And then after that, we'll bring in Oumah with the question about the gap. Jackie?
Sure. Thank you so much, Polycarp, for that question. And I just want to piggyback to what one of my colleagues has said not so long ago around the use of computers in schools and enabling our school systems to thrive in the age of AI. I think one reality that many African schools have to grapple with is the question of inequity. We will find that in many schools, let's begin by just confronting the question of infrastructure or the limitation of the same. Some of our schools do not have the resources necessary to equip those schools with, say, IT tools, etc. And so I think it's incumbent on the parts of schools and communities and governments to be able to rally together. And this is where collaboration comes in handy, because you realize that where there is a lack of resources, it means that we are not necessarily creating opportunities or environments for the technology to thrive. And so I think it is important to create partnerships with centers, communities, and even people from across different locations, backgrounds, across the continent, beyond the continent, to be able to really resource schools. Many of the schools do not have the right infrastructure to be able to compete with other able schools who do not have this as something to have to contend with. And so I think it is important for us to really address the question of the lack of equity vis-a-vis the call to equip our schools to be able to enable them to have these opportunities to thrive. And so I think confronting the government and thinking about policy, talking about questions of partnerships, thinking about philanthropy in its real sense now is something that many African schools really have to contend with. Gone are the days when we would sit back and hope for somebody to come from somewhere and be able to equip our schools for us. The time has now come for African schools to really think out of the box and think about how can we create opportunities for ourselves to be able to equip our own communities and schools to have the right resources to be able to thrive in the same manner in which other schools are thriving. And so I really think we need to think about this question of infrastructure, and then think about teacher training and capacity building. And these things are possible. Communities can just rally together and be able to provide spaces for collaboration where the capacity building, the training, opportunities for mentorship, and just building communities of practice that can go a long way in enabling this to flourish. So I think it goes beyond just thinking about what is and thinking about what can possibly happen when we rally together, when we think about how can we enable those who are less able to be able to also cope with the demands of technology and AI. And I think even if you look at what the IB is doing now, you will see that their call to have online assessment for the diploma program is something that is taking too long, simply because they also are aware of the reality that it's not always going to be the same pace for all the schools. And I think that's a reality that we really have to confront in our African setting, to be aware of the challenges, but also to think around how we can navigate those challenges in order to be able to provide opportunities for everybody to flourish. Thank you, Benson.
Yeah, well said, Jackie. Jackie, so just to a follow up on that question and what Mukasa said. Do you think that at this point in time, schools should slow down on technology adoption until teachers are ready, or would that just be an excuse? Should we wait for teacher readiness?
I don't think it's a question of teacher readiness. Polycarp, we can never slow down. We must actually be in the forefront to champion this new paradigm shift to happen, because teachers are ready. Teachers are always ready. They're lifelong learners. It's the resources that are lacking. And I think it is important for us to actually think about how can we create these resources? How can we enable teachers to become comfortable with the use of the tools that are necessary for them to create opportunities for students to be on a competitive edge when it comes to their peers across the world. And I think we are on the cusp. Africa as a continent is on the cusp of something phenomenal. That is without any doubt. But I think it is important for us to really confront the limitations that we're grappling with, for us to be able to surmount those challenges that are existing. I've spoken about collaboration. I've spoken about partnerships. I've spoken about philanthropy. How do we leverage? We have Ubuntu. We care about each other. We can do these things if we rally together. And I have not said that we must close our boundaries. We must open those boundaries and look for collaboration and support from across the divide, just so that we can also be age. So that's what when I was thinking about equity, but at the same time being able to find a way to surmount the challenges that exist.
Okay, good. Thank you. We will come and explore that. We'll come back and explore some of the issues that you raised. And I saw Mike shaking his head when I said, should we slow down on Mike? I'm sure you have something to add to that.
No, we can never slow down. And as Jackie has mentioned, the teachers are always ready. Now, what we have to do, we have to partner with companies, and their resources, and they're out there. For example, Cisco. Cisco is one of the company that offers very good training, free of charge. And then for institutions, it also covers maybe teachers. And then there may be a subscription. So the teachers can take these courses when the kids are in holiday. And then they can also empower themselves with other courses so that they become tech savvy and tech ready. I'm talking hands-on. And then they start setting up these labs in schools, wherever they operate from. However, they need a hand in government to help, because some of these things need money and maybe they need donors. And the donors are us. We, the Africans, we can empower ourselves. We cannot wait for aid, because actually the aid they give us is money they get from us. So yes, these teachers should continue what they are doing, but then they should be impacted. They should be provided with resources and courses to improve on their skill sets. Thank you so very much.
We can't hear you, Polycarp.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Mike, for that. I would like to bring in Oumah, considering what has been said so far, and I had mentioned the point that you work at the intersection of teaching, curriculum development, assessment, and teacher training. And from where you sit, Oumah, where do you see as the most significant disconnect between education policy and what is actually happening in the classroom? Is there a disconnect? Oumah?
Let me unmute. Is up now? You can get me, the moderator?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let me first of all say, okay, I'm seeing now is a good topic for discussion for the educator here. What support do teachers need most right now? But I think before I get there, let me just say that between the education our learners receive and the future prospect in the job market, what stands in the gap is the CBE, that is the competency-based education. And I think as a practitioner, that is an educator and even a content developer, the CBE itself was designed to equip the learners with the competencies that will enable them to get absorbed in the job market. Yeah, but we have a number of challenges already. Like one major challenge that you're facing currently is the human resource in our institutions, the infrastructure. Because you look at now the current dispensation, so it is this year that the CBE is in grade 10. So now we already talk about the senior school, that is grade 10 class. But look at now the infrastructure, it is not, most of our schools are not very equipped to handle the CBE. Like you look at now, apart from the core subject, we have the support subject. There are 3 of them, and one of them is ICT. So all the learners at grade 10 are supposed to be taught information, communication, technology. But now look at even the last mile connection. You find maybe just about 50-55% of our schools are connected with internet and even electricity. So that's a major challenge that you're facing. Our schools are also facing the challenge of human resource. And I think these have been an outcry. Maybe in the last 2 years, the government has done a bit of work in terms of staffing, but still we have a challenge because the student population, because currently in grade 10, we have almost 1.1 million students. So the staffing is still a major issue in our schools. But then if you look at now, in case we are to implement the CBE, according to what the KICD is after, then the competencies, because you look at now the 844 system that is being phased out next year with the last 844 code taking KCSE, the 844 was majorly knowledge-based. But now the CBE itself, it is skill-based. So we expect that the learners, they exit at grade 12, they'll have acquired competencies. And that's so even this year we are meeting our learners, and that's across the country, they were admitted on pathways. There are those who are doing the STEM, that is science, technology, mathematics, engineering. So unlike the 4 we'll only talk about specialization after exiting Form 4 for the grade 10 learners who are supposed to exit after 3 years, that is grade 10, 11, 12, they're already in their pathways to acquire enough competencies.
Thanks, Oumah, for your input. I would like to invite anyone that is joining us online to be able to, please use the chat function to ask questions you may I have, or to make a contribution towards this this conversation on what it means. Now, for the audience outside the African continent or outside Kenya, CBE stands for competence-based education, and for people in Kenya, it is a reform in education that represents a significant shift from an education system that was based on that was content-heavy towards a more skills-based curriculum or education system. Now, Benson, you, if I may come to you, you probably, of all of us, you're probably the one person that is most familiar with the continent. And we're talking about preparing kids today for the future. Surely there must be something that the African countries and education system is doing. Is there anything, and what is it that we are getting right?
I think my experience on the continent is that schools on the continent and school systems are getting very many things right, especially thinking about the history that is heaped against them in terms of access to quality education. And I think it's also important to mention here that when we talk about international education, by the way, or international curriculum, we are talking about a very small slither of education sector. The rest of it is public education. And what have I seen in public education across Africa? It is a very deliberate yearning to reform education and to make sure that the schools and the school systems are preparing the students for a future that we are not too sure about, we are uncertain about, but we want to make them flexible enough. We want to make them critical enough. We want to create autonomy and agency in the students so that they are able to operate in that world which we can only predict, we can only see trends, we can only think about. But you see government, when we talk with governments, and we would hope very, very much that government would take up some of the elements in the IB education, for example, inquiry-based conceptual kind of learning, thinking about critical thinking, thinking about ethical components in our education. We would be very, very happy if government were to pick up this. But we know the reality of public education is that I do not foresee government across Africa all adopting IB. Probably it's not even a good thing, but it is the deliberate move to adopt positive elements of education or curriculum design that I see across the board, that there is a very, very serious awareness that we cannot stay where we are. We cannot keep talking about just accumulation of content. We need future entrepreneurs, future leaders, future teachers, professionals who are very attuned to critical analysis. They are very attuned to big data assessment, analysis, and use in decision making. We need people who are very attuned to mentorship and coaching, something that we do very, very well as Africans. But it looks like at some point, the focus on competition and individualism has taken that away from us. And Jackie will tell you that when you're thinking about a school system, one way of building a school culture is by creating opportunities for mentorship, for coaching, for progressive, continuous development of teachers, especially new teachers coming into the teaching profession. So that's something, Polycarp, I have seen across the board, that governments, school leaders are aware of that this is where we need to move. But also, interestingly, an awareness of, as we think global, we must be very, very well anchored in terms of our African identity, and that there is absolutely nothing wrong with identifying ourselves as African with our Africanness, and then moving out there to embrace, to engage, to explore, to share, and to imbibe and to take actually what we see best in other systems of education and other curricula. So that awareness is also there, and you can sense the move that these are governments or these are school systems that want to anchor the students in their own identity and make them feel comfortable in their skin. Jackie mentioned that good schools need to ensure that they have included even those people or those students who would otherwise not get into the gates of some of the schools. And what are you doing by including those kind of marginal segments of the community? What you're doing is to replicate the great experiences, the great opportunities that these learners get in premium schools, and that these same people will go and influence the communities that they come from. So I think those are some of the things that I have seen working, and I have no doubt that it will only accelerate in the coming years.
Thanks, Benson. You make a good point. And Benson, before I hand over to Catherine in a minute, I just wanted to ask this question. How can we expand access to high quality education in ways that makes it more inclusive, more attainable, rather than something that may be perceived as exclusive or reserved for a privileged few, or tagging in the point on equity that was mentioned earlier. Benson.
Yes, I think one of the things that has shifted is when you think about access across Africa, there is access in different ways, because people would assume that in all countries, premium education is accessible or is available. But it is important to know that in some countries, premium education or high quality education is not even accepted, is not even allowed in some of the countries on the continent. But I'm happy to say that in most of the countries, different curricula are allowed in different countries so that they come and operate in those countries, and there are synergies, there are partnerships, there are collaborations. And I have seen this happening a lot. The governments themselves, the ministries of education or education systems within the public sector in education, moving out there to say, okay, we know you do this, we know you have done it for a long time, and you have done it very, very well. Here I'm referring to international curricula. How can we borrow from you? How can we share? And even in curriculum reform and curriculum development that we have seen across Africa, there has been a lot of collaboration with international curricula and systems. And that in itself is a great thing. But the other thing that is equally important is for organizations like the International Baccalaureate Organization to come to a realization that we need to put ourselves out there as thought leaders in education who are prepared to share some of our approaches, visions, and mission and pedagogies with the public school system. And we need to go to them and tell them, this is what we offer, this is what we have, this is what research has identified that we are doing very, very well. What are the areas of alignment that you see and you think that we can work together? What areas can we collaborate? And this is a conscious way and a respectful way of coming to government and ministries, not telling them that we have the best education system, no, but telling them that there is something we have done so well, and we think it would add value to what you're trying to do. And I think that's where IB is moving towards and saying, if a government or an education system that is outside international education sees something positive in IB education, they can pick a component, whether that component is service learning, whether it is critical thinking and introduction to epistemology or learning about what knowledge is that they find so good. Then they can pick that, and IB would assist the systems to adopt those elements that they find useful, and especially contextually aligned to whatever goals and objectives they have in individual countries. So I think that's one way of expanding access to quality education. But finally, speaking for the IB, is where the IB has recognized that if we want to impact 5 million students in the next 5 years or so, we need to move to different categories of schools. And that is where IB is thinking about giving discounts for schools that want to adopt IB, partner with the training institutions across Africa so that we can train IB-ready teachers, so that we can have a cohort of IB-ready teachers all over. They must not all be in IB schools, but wherever they will be, they are going to deliver a high quality kind of teaching and instruction to the students that they encounter. So that's what I've seen.
Thanks, Benson. At this point, I'll hand over to Catherine to run the next segment. Over to you, Catherine.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Polycarp, and to all of you. So I've been taking notes. I feel like I'm back in class. But before I go to what I've written, Jacob, could I just see everybody on screen, if possible? So before I go to just what I've written, there's a question there. Thanks, Jacob. There's a question there on screen. And this, I'll just have all of you just pop this up, just one answer without overthinking it. And some of you have actually just spoken to this. If you could redesign one thing about school, what would it be? We start with you, Oumah. Can you hear us? We can see you. Okay, Oumah. We can't hear you at all whatsoever. So as you're getting that sorted out, Jackie.
But I think my...
Okay, what's that?
Okay, I'll be back. Who is on the mic?
Okay, we can't. Okay, let's just, you figure that out and then we get Jackie.
Hello.
Jackie, if you could design one thing about school, what would it be?
Build vibrant communities of practice.
Okay. Okay, I'll come to that. Let's hope my memory will work really well remembering that, because I want to expand on that. Mike, what would that be?
Preparing students to be job creators rather than job seekers.
Oh, okay. All right. Dr. Kairu, what would that be?
This is interesting. I've thought about this a little bit and said that very many things in school system have changed, but the design of the space, the design of the school itself is one of the things that has remained consistent over hundreds of years. And I think it's time that we think about redesigning the learning spaces themselves differently.
Okay, I'll come to that as well. Polycarp, of course, I'll come to you with questions because we've been asking all these educators here. But just to answer this one question.
Sure. Yes. So many times education schools operate as silos, and cross-curriculum, transdisciplinary collaboration, so that what mathematics does feeds into what sciences are doing, and the humanities, as we call them, individuals and societies. So yes, cross-curriculum, transdisciplinary collaboration is what I'll
you just enhance. Have to sound so complex. You just said, like, how am I supposed to repeat that sentence? Cross-curriculum, multi-what? Okay, Oumah, can we hear you now? Oumah, can we hear you now?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's quite an interesting conversation. And maybe let me say this, to redesign is to remodel. And I think one thing now, if you look at the situation we have currently in Kenya, then I'll remodel or redesign the culture of our institutions. If you look at a number of our institutions, we not want to drop names that have had unrest. You find out the over-enrollment. You know, there are schools that surprise us in the country, because these schools, the last 50 years, maybe they've not had any unrest in our schools. So I'll remodel or redesign the culture of our institutions. Maybe just a quick one, what do these institutions stand for? Because there are schools that are spanning 100 years, and because of the culture which is deeply embedded. So I'll remodel the culture of some of the institutions.
Okay.
And of course, the obvious one is that now, with the CPE thing, about now that we have an education system which is skill-based. So again, one thing that should stand out, that when these learners get out of our colleges, maybe tertiary institutions, are they competent enough, and are they going to deliver in the job market? So there are two things that stand out for me in terms of redesigning the school system.
Okay, thank you all for your contribution. There's a reason I asked that, and I'll come to your answers because I feel like they each speak to each other, and maybe the bigger question will be, so why are we not doing it? But let's see what the audience is saying, at least those who have sent us their feedback so far. Let's show that there so you can all see it. Hold on, can you see, is it there? Is it, yes, there we are. So Sally says, right now, teachers in African schools urgently need more colleagues. I'm assuming that's more teachers, better training, and stronger support systems. One of you spoke to this. Was it you, Oumah, or who was it? Then still Sally says, Sub-Saharan Africa alone faces a deficit of about 15 million teachers by 2030. Making recruitment, retention, and professional development the most pressing needs. Jackie, I see you nodding, so could you just speak to that?
Spot on, Sally, and thank you so much for sounding that out, because I think that's also another reality. Besides infrastructure, I think it's the limitation in terms of the teachers who can be posted to support each of the schools we have. Africa alone has so many schools, but the ratio of teachers to learners is appalling. I mean, if you just think about it, one teacher for 60 children or students or learners in one classroom is baffling. So I think it's important that we also think about not just teacher training, but support for enabling the teachers trained to get into the classrooms, to be supported, to get in onward learning, professional development, etc. Because if they are overwhelmed, then mental health becomes an issue as well. And I think right now in the current space that we find ourselves in, we are having to contend with a lot of issues regarding teacher well-being and staff well-being, and how are we supporting our teachers to become the kind of people that we want them to be in the current space in the systems. We really need to think about not just quantity, but quality in terms of how we are caring for the carers as well. And I think it is something that we really have to grapple with as we move forward. So not just the numbers, but what we do with the people we already have is also something that we have to think about very carefully. Sally, thank you so much for that.
Wow, okay. So how do we, okay. I'm trying so much to flow because I wrote a lot of notes during that first segment with Polycarp. But there's a question here. I think this is going to you, Mike. How can we prepare our children regarding the digital space and cybersecurity on what they consume in the digital space? What is FAs? FAs, they garner education and for their safety. I don't know what FAs is. Maybe you do, but Mike, that's your question. I think so.
Yes, thank you so much for that. The children have to be provided with course materials, which of course are filtered. And as you know, we all have cell phones, but when you give your child a cell phone, you make sure he or she has limitations. So the same methodology can be used in these training courses. Not also to forget, remember the COVID era. We are studying from home. So we can give these courses to our children, then as parents, you can chip in, but even at schools, these courses can be monitored. Any course that is out there can be monitored depending on which content it is giving out, but also which age groups. So to answer the question very well, we need the digital space, but it has to be filtered. It has to be monitored. And that has to be done by both the schools and the parents. Because guess what? There are some courses that are not going to be covered in schools, but you want to impact your child. You're going to go online, you're going to get a program, and you're going to recruit them or enroll them. But also you have to monitor. You have to see which content are they getting. Now, once the kids come to YouTube, the same thing, YouTube can be filtered. You can put in restrictions on what the kids have to watch and what they don't have to watch. But Jackie mentioned something very profound that is very important. It's a culture. However much you want to move forward in the digital space, all these have to be embedded in our culture. When you go to China, you will be surprised. They have their own apps. The TikTok in China is not the TikTok in Africa. So the TikTok in China is promoting their culture. Yeah. So we have to do the same things. That whatever we are giving to our kids, to be in the cyberspace, it has to have also an element of promoting our culture. Mm. What we see as global may not be good in our culture, and we are defined by our cultures. Thank you.
Okay, it's like the same person has a follow-up question, which is that one of the guests has spoken about changing the culture. Could you shed more light? And I would like to ask, why don't we start by knowing what the kids are wired to become? Like do a SWOT, like a SWOT analysis. this commenter here, who's taking that first? Anyone of you just chime in? Jackie?
I think I can take that. Our culture is the everyday, is what we live on a day-by-day basis, right? So if you want to think about culture doesn't change overnight. It is the fundamental principle of what is it about us that makes us us. That must be the defining question, right? So schools have to ask themselves the hard questions around who are we and what are our learners becoming? What are we doing on a day-by-day basis that speak to who we are? So if, for instance, we know that for an education that is humanistic in nature or one that focuses on the human being, what are some of the qualities that speak to that? And are we mirrored who we are as a school? So we need to think about what are we cultivating? Are we enabling curiosity to take shape? Are we advancing the need for discernment among our children? What is the concept of ethical reasoning, for example? Are we allowing spaces, and Benson spoke about creativity, are we allowing for spaces for, sorry, he spoke about spaces, so are we allowing those spaces for creativity and innovation to take root? What about collaboration? We've heard so much about collaboration from different facets in this conversation this afternoon. But how are schools enabling collaboration and teamwork to take shape? What is systems thinking? Because I know that we all understand what syllabi and curriculum mean and what is enshrined in the same. But beyond curricula, beyond syllabi, what is the system thinking that we are embedding in our practice? And I think if we put all these things together, based on who fundamentally we are, then we are shaping culture. And it's about allowing students to be comfortable in the spaces that they occupy. Because the learner of tomorrow, and I've had a colleague of mine on the panel speak about the learner of tomorrow, they will not be distinguished by what they know, but what they do with what everyone else knows. So I think there must be a distinction there. We can't all be talking about A, B, C, D. That's important. But how do we grapple with the nuances of the A, B, C, D of every days and for tomorrow, so that we can actually be able to say with confidence that our children are well positioned to be able to grapple with this very intricate world that they're finding themselves in at the moment. So culture, yes, but it is about the simple things that make us who we are, that define the uniqueness of the substance that makes every school. So let's think about that, because that's the DNA of what education is about. Everybody can know about an IB diploma program, for example. Within the IB diploma program, what is it that enables our IB graduates to be able to stand up and say, I am a decent human being? I can challenge whatever it is that I'm confronted with in life. I can speak with confidence about the things that matter to me and to our societies. I can look at a problem and be able to find a solution to that problem. So I think, let's think about the DNA of our school systems. Once we are able to identify what that is, it's going to become very easy for us to talk about culture. But culture can't change overnight. It has to be dedicated work. It has to be focused work. It has to be all the resources that we're putting into the system that speak to who we are and who we are becoming.
Catherine, allow
Yes.
me to pick the tail end of that question there.
Yeah, sure.
About focusing on what students want, or where the students are going, or what the students may become, and doing some kind of SWOT analysis and decide this student fits in this box and the other one in this box. I think if we follow research, and there is a lot of it, we should be aware, and we need to be very, very careful about wanting to imagine that what our children, let's not even call them students, what our children show an appetite for, maybe competence for, or they show a lot of passion for, at different levels and different ages. Psychology doesn't mean that that's what they are going to become. And more, when you look at across the board, you see education evolving towards more broader and less of specialization earlier, and letting the learners and the students have an experience, an exposure, an engagement, and some level of depth in all the knowledge areas, because the future requires us to, what Polycarp was talking about, probably in difficult terms there, transdisciplinary kind of approach. It's that you are aware of different areas of knowledge, that you can hold comfortable conversations in the sciences, in the humanities, in the arts, and you are not completely blank in terms of mathematical approach to knowledge, and especially importantly today, historical kind of knowledge. What is the historical kind of knowledge, and what does it give to every person, which is so critical? And when people ask the question, why is it that we know about the history of far off places, and we don't know the history of ourselves beyond our grandfathers, and beyond there we don't have personal histories? And what has that done to us, to uproot us, and to disengage us with our history? So I would, in fact, I'm reminded of, I don't remember what year, Tony Blair Commission of Education in the UK. And they came short of saying we need a British baccalaureate, akin to international baccalaureate, that uses a liberal arts approach to knowledge, that the learners or the students or our children need to be crowded in more areas than just one. So that's one way of preparing them for the flexibility that Jackie is talking about. And I think that's what the future is looking at.
Okay. Thank you for that addition. I just want to do one more comment. Bonjour. I'm assuming all of you outside who know French have pronounced it properly. So, as an ardent international educator, I'm really enjoying the comments made about the globalization of education in Kenya and in Africa. Global citizenship is my passion. Having been across continents for over 30 years, I've lately noticed a growing tendency to build a partnership between emblematic educational institutions in the UK and local schools. Someone will just have to break that down for us. Polycarp will break this down for us. As an illustration, I'm currently working in China at Malvern College, that city. Is it Qingdao or Qingdao? That one. MCQ UK has 4 Chinese partnerships. then the comment ends there. But yeah, so just Polycarp, just simplify this for us.
I understand this. My interpretation of this question is we have lots of groups of schools that are spreading. Most recently, there's a school called Wellington Colleges. It's a chain of schools around the world. They originally British, but they have schools across India, China, and they're now coming to the African continent. One opening in Lagos next year, and thereafter Tatu City here in Nairobi. And besides Wellington colleges, we have other chains of schools that come. There's value in that. Speaking about the African continent, I believe that from what you said in the beginning, we need more opportunities. We need more schools. Our governments I think could do more to provide these opportunities. The well-established global brands have the financial resources and are able to scale, their operations across continents. So my understanding is that we just have these chains of schools that are opening across the globe. I think for them, the motivation is profit, but there are benefits besides just profit. I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks.
Anybody wants to chime in or? Okay, so I have a question for you, Polycarp.
Benson has something to say. He's familiar. He works with schools.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. No, I think you captured that well, but I wanted to pick it from the other side of why are they coming to Africa? Why are they going to China? Why are they going to all these places? I think they are following the trend that, and when they read the future, they can tell. First of all, education is a game of numbers, populations and growth, and where they can see potential. And I think that should be a very, very strong indicator for us that we have one of the most important and treasured resource, and that is the young people. And it should be our opportunity to see or to set up policies and guidelines and partnerships that safeguard the young people and ensure that if these organizations or if these groups take the profit, we are going to be left with the longest lasting kind of benefits, which are young people who have been educated, who can come back and work in our context and continue to influence even more, so that we are not short-sighted at looking at, this school has set base in Nairobi or in Lagos and whatever. And the fact that it is targeting a certain demography, that there is nothing we can gain from them. No, there should be a lot to gain from them, because they are telling us something about our potential, and we need to pick that one up. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just quickly add there, Catherine, that even Nova, ENCO education systems are all over the continent now, and I think it's an indicator that people are seeing something in those institutions, right? And I think it's a question of why now, and as I think Benson has cleverly put it, to mean that they're already reading into the future in terms of where they see themselves entrenching and making sure that they cement their own systems in place. So it's a question of, do we want to welcome all this, or do we want to unreservedly, think about the impact and that kind of thing? So I think it also depends on governments, and it depends on the value add. If it's a question of a good thing coming, then by all means we must embrace, open our doors, and do all these things. And just to add on to that, I think even with the United World Colleges, for a very long time, for over 60 years now, this movement has been in the world. But for some reason, if you look across the different continents, we only have 2 United World Colleges in Africa. What does that mean for this continent, vis-a-vis Europe, where we have so many spread across that particular continent? So I think sometimes we wonder, are we opening our doors wide enough for some of these very good systems that are already existing to take shape? Or are we thinking about other things in spite of what is already existing? So I think it's just a question of looking at what is this future and where is education going in this continent that we must embrace and grapple with.
Thanks for that, Jackie.
Catherine, I want to chip in here.
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Yes, so it's a very okay to welcome every school's setups into our regions or into our continent, but also the governments have to censor, to filter these schools. The content there and the objective, their main objective to come into our countries. Because as you know, many of the founders of such schools have their own culture, have traditions they are trying to promote through education. So then our educators and the ministries of education, they have to see beyond what is being, put out there at a school, but what's behind and what culture are they going to promote? Because as you know, to control this world, we have to control the mind. So if we start with our children, giving them the knowledge or the stuff we want them to see in the future, guess what? It's more likely that our children will drive to that path. That's why the government has to come in and say, okay, this is a good school, it's a good program, but what are we offering to our children? And how is the government going to benefit? How are the people, the citizens going to benefit from such programs? Jumping on getting these programs is very good, but they have to have an agenda that is benefiting us as Africans back home. Thank you.
Yeah. Oumah, do you want to chime in on that, or are you with us? Can we hear you now? We can't hear you. You are mute. We can't hear you at all. Your mic isn't connected, so just fix that, Oumah. So with everything we've heard, and the guy who made the comment, and I think Polycarp, you explained what that means. So this question is for you, Polycarp. Having worked across different systems, different cultures, obviously different countries, what have you seen there that, and it still ties into everything we've been discussing the last 10 minutes, what have we seen there that we should perhaps, or rather we could adopt in our continent, in our education system, continental wide? Like, what is, we don't need to have everything, but what is the one thing that you feel like if this was adopted in our schools here, it'd be a game changer, however small it is?
Okay, so may I start saying that so working across different school systems and cultures and different contexts has taught me one that there's no one size fits all model for excellence in education. What works in one context may not necessarily work in another context. So systems succeed when they're deeply rooted in their cultural, social, and economic realities. So for our continent, Africa, this means that we must stop thinking of education primarily as something we can import and start seeing it as something we can intentionally design to suit our own context. So yes, there is value in getting exposed to international systems, amongst many other things, governance, teacher improvement, inquiry-based learning, accountability, and so on and so forth. We mentioned something a bit earlier. If there was one thing that I would bring to our education is to create an education that recognizes the challenges that we have and to train our young people to see those problems and find solutions for those problems. I think that's what we need to do. That we need to create or to equip our young people to be problem solvers for the challenges of our time on the continent.
Yeah. Okay. So beyond grades and passing exams, you know, because we all go in there because you want to get a good grade. In my generation, it was get a good grade, get a good job. And those jobs are also determined. There were like 4 jobs we had to do according to our parents. Okay, some of us didn't follow that path, but hey. So beyond that, beyond just going there, pass exams, go in there, be a good child. What can our children? What else can they come out of? Can they live with when that phase of their life is done? Education, that is. After school, besides good grades, what else?
I'll let my fellow panelists chime in on that.
Just your question before I take it to everyone else.
Okay. So the first, you know, we talked about the, I think what we call them 21st century skills, equipping young people 21st centuries, and we mentioned one of them being problem solving. Yes, and we mentioned one of them being problem solving. Yes, so I don't know why I'm echoing. I hear echoing. I don't know. I'm echoing. I hear echoing. I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you guys hear?
Yes, keep going.
Okay. So other it will be other skills. Critical thinking is a very important one. And soft skills like, you know, working in teams. So you know, being able to work with other people. But most importantly is, I think, as I said earlier, being able to address the problems that we have in our society, and finding those. And you know, I prefer using examples, and you know, hopefully, I don't know if you'll ever get to see this, but one of the UWC alumni from Sierra Leone grew up during the time of civil war in that country, and it was one of the most brutal civil wars. People were amputated, you know, their legs at the ankle or in their knee, or at their hands. And so he sought to find a solution to that problem, and he created, donors would normally bring, I think they're called prosthetic limbs, and he noticed that they couldn't actually use them. It's like taking up one size shoe and give everybody, and everybody's, you know, leg is different size. And so he tried to find a solution to put something that would connect the prosthetic limb and the prosthetic leg and the residue limb. And that's one thing. And we could talk of many issues. But yes, problem solving, collaboration, critical thinking, amongst other things. Okay. Thanks, Catherine.
Dr. Kairu, you want to chime in there?
Sorry, I had muted there so that we don't have any background noise. So yes, and I mean, critical thinking, very important. I think the ability to build communities and ability to negotiate relationships in the world is very, very critical. It's almost something like self-efficacy, you know, ability to manage your own self moving in this world, whether it is in the local community or the global community. So, and some of these things really do not have an off-the-shelf curriculum. It is the question of how the learning is designed in class. It is how communication happens between the teachers and the students and the whole community of in the school. And when we as educators talk about a community of learners or a community of a growing community, that is exactly what, with a certain level of content and so on. But these other, and I don't like to think about them or see them as soft skills. I just see them as essential skills. Negotiation, for example, who teaches the skills of negotiation? I mean, if even negotiating yourself, I mean, for yourself, advocating for yourself, advocating for a position that you hold very, very passionately. It is not just a question of good communication. There is more to it. And there are schools that seem to do that effortlessly. Why? Because of the way they are, they have developed, the culture that they have developed in the school, and you find that students from that school seem to have some sense of or some ease, even when they are talking with other people, even when they are sharing their position, even when they want to negotiate for space. And we know that's what we do in this world. But more importantly, kind of thinking about collaboration and community and working together much, much more than talking about competition and coming up on top. I think everybody on this podcast knows about the corporate culture that we have seen or we have learned in books or in sociology and in the anthropology, and we know what dangers and risks are there in that kind of climbing the ladder thing. And I think to undo that kind of thing and show people that it is more important how many people that you bring up as you go up, rather than how many people you step on your way up, is very, very important as we are bringing up these young ones on this continent. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dr. Kairu. Oumah, at some point we need to hear you. We see you. We want to hear you, please. Unmute your microphone.
Yeah. My microphone was muted. Okay, at least now you can get me. Oh, in terms of globalization, you raise an issue of global citizen. And a global citizen is one who can easily traverse the continent, Africa, Asia, Australia, North America, South America. And now this is largely pegged on the quality education that we are receiving as a country. Maybe for the sake of Kenya, if you read today's papers, there's something mentioned about some of our premier universities, that is University of Nairobi and Moi University, that offers medicine and surgery, where some of the courses that the universities are offering, we find they have issues of compliance. Are we meeting the standards as a country? And this start from even the basic education that is in our junior schools, and when you receive quality education, they're able to become a global citizen, because a global citizen is one who can be accepted, that is globally. So now how do the question, now even in the new dispensation of curriculum-based education, are we giving our learners quality education that is able to make them global citizens?
Okay. Okay. I'm assuming you're done.
Is the education that our learners? I think maybe it's niche of network. I think where I am, it may not be very sound. Yeah, but the question is that now the learners that we are turning out of our tertiary institutions, are they receiving quality education? Is it skill-based that can make them be global citizens? Because to be global, that means that worldwide you are able to be accepted. And I think that's where we had an issue as we transition from the 844 system of education, which have been with us for around 40 years, the CBE. Is it giving the learners the skills, the competencies that they're able to be global citizens? And I think the issue which have been mentioned, like some of the core competencies in terms of communication, collaboration, that is self-efficacy, in terms of the digital literacy. So are we getting those components? But again, it's a give and take, because for the KICD, if you look at our senior school, one of the core subjects that now we've introduced is the community service learning. So this is compulsory for students who are in STEM, social sciences, and arts and sport. So that now, apart from just maybe the course that they want to do at the university, are they able to communicate and collaborate with communities? And that's why now we have the CSL, that is community service learning, where there are 4 strands. The first strand that we're teaching at grade 10, and this has a spiral effect up to grade 12. We are teaching them in citizenship. So that now as a student or a learner, are they able to be citizens who are ethical? Second, we are teaching about life skills. So that's why we talk about the decision making, critical thinking, creative thinking, and all that. Yeah. Then the third, we are teaching about action research. Are they able to come up with a project which is entrepreneurial in nature? Yeah, because there's been a bit of disconnect that we find even our learners, when they transit from our universities, whether they've studied law, they studied medicine, education, or entrepreneurship, then are they able to understand finance and even come up with a project? So that's why I think we can give it to the Ministry of Education for Kenya, that they said that they introduced that in the community service learning. We expect that now when these learners exit, they're also able to communicate and collaborate with the communities. Because again, you cannot become a global citizen if you're not able to communicate and collaborate with your local community. So that's one thing that I can give them as a plus for the CBE.
Okay. All right. Local. Mike, I want to come to you for a bit. The few conversations we've had on exactly how our education system here compare to the West, specifically, where you're based now, and with your experience as a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces, and very deeply steeped into, the whole cybersecurity conversation, AI. Last week, we actually had our live stream was on AI. And I've had a lot being said in this conversation, which is really valuable. In terms of being able to, I know it's not necessarily a competition, but are our children competitive, say 5 years from now? If we don't do some of the things that you all have proposed in this podcast, what is our competitive edge? I suppose that's a question. Assuming all was equal, assuming that's one of my dreams. Assuming all was equal, it may not, but the world is heading fully digital. Okay, the richest man in the world now it's because of the digital. His companies are all fully digital, etc. So I see you do this. I know you have other opinion on that, but my question is, how do we, what sharpens our competitive edge when you compare with your experience and this whole conversation? If you plug what you know here in this continent, what does that look like? What would that look like? Those are two questions in one, I think.
Yes, thank you so very much. I was laughing because you mentioned about tech and why the billionaire today, I think now he's a trillionaire.
Billionaire.
Mm-hmm. He's a tech guy.
Yeah.
He's a tech guy. So the first question was, are our children going to be competitive? Now, it will go back to our foundations. A 7-year-old I have in my house today, what she's learning, is she learning the same things my other children in Africa, they are learning? Are they having the same resources? Now, what is she going to be after 5 years, and what is my other son in Uganda and Kenya and Zambia going to be? So then that will bring us into how they are going to compete on this modern way, on this modern era of IT or AI. Because now, if we are going to go global, we have to teach our children the global courses, the things that make them global. Which courses are we actually teaching the kids? Are the kids in the Western part of the world getting better education, better skills? If they are, can we also have that same share and impact our children in Africa? If we don't, then there is not going to be a balance, because a 7-year-old I have in my house today, 20 years from now, she may be working for NASA. She will be working for Elon Musk on the Space Center. Is my child born in Nairobi, going to school in Nairobi 20 years, will be also having the same? So now that goes back to us. As we impact our children, as we decide on which courses they are taking, are they going to build them to the fast pace of this world? AI is moving so fast. do we have data centers in Africa that are going to help us into AI? Because as we speak today, if you don't have a data center, then AI cannot work. It's about data. So if we don't build these infrastructures back home, then there's no way these children are going to compete. And this is what happens all of us. Once we move or migrate from Africa, wherever we come to the European world, or we come to America, we find ourselves going back to school. You came with a degree, you have a PhD, but it doesn't apply in this world. How can we be global? It means if I'm moving from Kenya, migrating to America, my credentials, if I've been a doctor, will fit me to be a doctor in the US, but it doesn't happen like that. Then you have to take other courses, and there are some of our courses that are not even regarded. So it goes back to the foundation. The courses we are giving our children will determine if they are going to be global and if they are going to be able to compete. If we are giving limited courses and those are not focused on change and AI and IT, guess what? They will not be able to compete. They will come in a market and they will be providing a service to the guys who are at the top. However, if we impact them now, they will also have a chance to compete. And actually, they will be building stuff back home. We need another Elon Musk in Kenya. We don't have to be studying about them in the US. We need them in Kenya. Africa, by the way, we are so blessed. We are the most knowledgeable people on this world. When you go to Harvard, you're going to be surprised. The Harvard Law School, majority are Africans. And that is beating the administration with a lot of pain. How can these Africans be in Harvard making policies? It's because we are smart. All we need are resources. And the resources have to come to us. Because guess what? They come, they take our minerals, and then they give us peanuts. But we can use our minerals ourselves to build these resources back home. We have the money. We can develop our stuff back home, get money to impact our countries. Thank you so very much.
Well,
Catherine,
thank you. Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Allow me to chime in. I'll say two very controversial things.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is what Polycarp said, that there is need for us educators on the continent, or school leaders, system leaders, or policymakers to start asking the question: are we designing educational either experiences for our students, or curricula, or policies, or whatever, that are suited for our context so well that we are solving the challenges that we have on the continent? Mm-hmm. If we do that so well, why is that not international standard? Is somebody in Geneva? Is somebody seated in Washington? Does somebody seated in those cities care about what we are doing here and wanting to do it like us, so that they are recognized as doing it as at the international standard? Because there is a way in which the conversation about international standards and global measures and all these kind of things do a lot of damage to us. And that we are always in a rat race chasing things that are called global standards. And the biggest question is, why do you want global standards if the questions and the challenges that you are solving are local? Lack of water, lack of balanced diet, malnutrition, disease, and this kind of thing. And when you do those things, why is it that it is not going to be looked at as at the global level? So I'm rather skeptical sometimes about the global standards. And what I like to hear more is, we build for ourselves. We are contextually conscious. we are doing things that are appropriate to our people, and we are making sure that we are solving the challenges that we have. Let me give you a practical example. You are a medic. You are doing a good job in Kenya. You have been treating patients. You have been overworking. We know the conditions. You've been giving all your all. You have trained for 7 years. You have done a fantastic job. If you go to the US or go to Europe and you are not acknowledged as a medic who should be able to get into the system, is the problem the medic or the system? And I think it is important for us not to heap the challenges on the individual and to see that there are systemic issues that are very unfair, and we don't have to cry about them, but we have to be conscious of them and be aware of them and navigate them. It doesn't mean that you are a bad or a poor medic. No, it means that the system is deliberately kept that way for a very good reason. I think that's one of the things that we need to acknowledge. And that's one way of empowering, enabling our educators or our professionals on the continent. And I'm telling you, and Polycarp knows this very, very well, it is those who insist about global standards who are going to come knocking and picking you because they know the work that you have done. So that one. The second one, and I don't want to go all the time, but the second one is a question of employment. And I've heard this a lot, and I think this is a good platform to talk about it. The question of not having enough, not having opportunities for our educated young people. And sometimes we are very quick to talk about, or we have not aligned the education to the needs of the market, as if education exists for the market. I don't think that is what it should be. It should not be that I am training my students, or even at university, I'm training graduates to just come and work in your SME or in your company. So what happens to the other neighboring company? There is a way in which education is for preparing human beings to have a certain basic acceptable levels of competencies and awareness and ability, flexibility to do things, but not to do things in your company, not to do things in your Ministry of Home Affairs or whatever, no, but to do things in a certain professional setting. And like Polycarp, I like examples. In the 1960s, students used to leave A-level and get jobs, mid-level manager jobs. Do you really want to tell me that the Form 6 student or graduate was actually more prepared than a graduate today? Absolutely not. Why did they get jobs? Because the opportunities were there. You cannot convince me that a person who left Form 4 and got a very good job is because they were so well prepared and our graduates are not. No, this is a question of the economy. The economy must produce or must create opportunities for the people who are leaving the school system. And that's one way of matching the students who are leaving or graduates to workplaces, and not to ask them to do what we call the degree inflation. That because your first degree cannot take you somewhere, you have to take a master's for you to get there. Absolutely, that's not the way it's supposed to be. If you look at countries that the holders of diplomas, the holders of certificates have jobs, it's because the economy has expanded so much, there are jobs for all those levels. So it's important for us to put some nuance to some of these conversations.
I mean, I can only just like chime into your first point, which is when you said, why do we have to be so oriented towards global standards, and yet we have to create whatever it is we are creating or co-creating is for us. It's for here. It's for who we are. It's And then at the same time, I remember also what Jackie said, there's a reason they're coming here, like why now? So when is a word, okay, I'm going to be landing a word here. I'm risking because I'm in the presence of educators. Is the word juxtapose the two of them? Yeah, right? So when you put the two, like there's a reason they're all coming here, based on that comment and the question and what Polycarp said. And then what you have said, and also what Mukasa has said about Harvard being full of Africans. I would never have known that. Me, just the Mwananchi who's not in that education space, I would never have known that. And that's a whole other topic. So I really respect what you've said, that it cannot be that we're here just stressing ourselves about being global, yet they're still coming here. So you find this, so who's supposed to fix it? Polycarp, as I hand this over to you, you may want to answer that question, because I'm handing to my co-moderator. You may want to answer that question. Who fixes that? And I know every country sits with its own government, but who fixes that?
Yeah, so there is an angel. Does it have to be Western to be global? Something African can be global. But just to say, this has been quoted before, a quote by Chinua Achebe that says, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." And so, who's saying this? The narrative of what is global is obviously being fronted by other people. So, yes, globalization is real. There's increasing interconnectedness of education systems across countries through shared curricula, international qualifications, cross-border partnerships, you name it. And there's also student mobility, hence the large number of African students at Harvard and other global universities. Globalization expands opportunity, and we agree with that. But the question that I think Benson is raising here, that we risk what may be described as cultural homogenization, where local histories, languages, knowledge systems are overshadowed by dominant global, so to speak, global in quote narratives. And there's also the risk of inequity, where international pathways become accessible mostly to wealthier people. But to answer your question, who fixes this? I think we need to assume this role of the lion, the African lion. So so that our narrative is not dictated by someone else out there. Jackie heads United World College, bringing people from multiple contexts, and she might have a better answer to that question, who fixes this?
I don't think it's a straightforward response. There's a straightforward response to that question. I think it really hinges on balance. How do we reckon without taking any extreme ends? I think it's important to understand the different nuances around what globalization entails, but also thinking about context-based education as we've heard today, and really finding a fine line or a balance between the two, and harnessing, the different schools of thought to be able to come to a place of understanding and appreciate that certain things can act in tandem for us to be able to support teaching and learning, and in terms of pedagogy, really thinking out of the box. But I think when you say who fixes it, it's really all of us, really. If you think about it, all educators in this space. Coming into education is a calling. I don't think there's anybody who is in the classroom today who is only doing it to receive means of livelihood. If it's the case, I'm afraid that we are in it for some shockers. But I think that if you really sign up to be an educator, you have to think about the human element that is attached to it. How are we enabling young people to be prepared for this world? and I think that's a greater responsibility. It goes beyond simply getting into a classroom and delivering content, the traditional method where there's regurgitation and what have you. I think right now we need to confront the reality of the curriculum, right? So if you think about it, we all know there is a written curriculum, there is a taught curriculum, there is an assessed curriculum, but there's also a hidden curriculum. So what do we educators embed in the hidden curriculum, for instance? Is it the space where we can confidently say that now it is important that that hidden curriculum is somewhat entrenched into the everydays of what we do with the written, taught, assessed curriculum? So I think it's important when you think about context-based education, as Polycarp rightly explained, we are beginning to see ourselves in a space where what are the ethos, what are the value systems, what are the LSBs, what are the learner profile attributes, what are the skills and competencies that may not necessarily be so obvious in the other forms of curriculum, and how do we ensure that they form part and parcel of everything we are teaching. In terms of competitiveness, just to go back to that question, I don't think we should come to a place, it is an important discussion, but I don't think that we should overly dwell on it based on what we are currently experiencing with the geopolitical space. I mean, if you think about it, America is now closing its borders to certain nationalities. The world is quickly changing, and there is an attempt by communities and systems to have their own, or to embrace those with whom they want to associate. So where does that then leave communities that are not deemed as being eligible to get into those other spaces? And I think that really sets up a conversation around what is it that is ideal for our own context? What is it that is ideal for those countries and communities' context that would still fit a certain benchmark of internationalness or global mindedness or that kind of thing? And I think it's really stepping out of our comfort zone and thinking about what works for us in terms of that context-based education. What kind of curriculum really works for each nation? What kind of curriculum works for each space? And what can we do within our own context that still leaves us standing strong, as opposed to having to cry foul based on certain geopolitical decisions? And I think it's really important for educators to stand up and say, we are the ones who've got the means to really rethink education. Think about systems. Benson mentioned systemic issues. What is systems thinking? In this day and age, every educator worth the while should really be thinking about systems thinking. How do we create solutions to our own challenges? We have an ambitious project here at school where we want to get out of the grid by 2030. When you have such an ambitious project, we all know where the world is going with climate issues and trying to be green and making sure that we are living in harmony with our environment. So when you have such endeavors, it is important to actually rope it into the curriculum. Make sure that the children are able, or the students are able to appreciate how this works, from inception to securing funding, to institutionalizing it, to making sure that they're socialized to appreciate and understand the why behind it, and to think about how can they be co-creators of the implementation of, institutionalizing in a sense that makes everybody proud of that endeavor. And I think it's really thinking about those kinds of situations and embedding it into your daily teaching and learning initiatives to be able to enable students to see themselves in action. And if we are able to do this, if we are able to allow, for example, students to become people who can create peaceful coexistence, Polycarp mentions that I'm in a UWC, we get students from everywhere in the world. Our ambition is to really get them to live and learn together, to enable them to champion peace in our world, to make them think that no one person is more special or more important than another person next to them. To have children from conflict war zones to live together in a cubicle is not a mean feat. So to get an understanding that we can be different, that we can live together, is already an accomplishment when it comes to global standards, if you think about it. So I think it's really looking at the context and looking at what is it that makes sense in the world in which we find ourselves today, modeling that through targeted, focused initiatives that allows for people to see themselves in action, to co-create, to think beyond the normal, ordinary, traditional mindsets of pedagogy, so that we can get to a place where we can be proud of the people we are actually becoming I hope that answers the question, Polycarp.
Thanks, Jackie, for that answer. As we draw towards the conclusion of this conversation today, preparing, one thing is clear, preparing Africa's children for the future is not one single reform. Lots needs to be done. It's not one new curriculum. And yes, from our context in Kenya, there is the move towards the competence-based curriculum. It's not a device in every classroom. As a matter of fact, some education systems are rethinking the role of devices in the classroom. Rather, it is a mindset shift. So the future of education globally, but particularly in Africa, demands more than just content knowledge. We've already mentioned a couple of things: digital citizenship, amongst other things. So we have been reminded that access without quality, I think, is insufficient. Quality without relevance or context, again, is not sufficient enough. And reform without teacher readiness, the question of teacher readiness, and not just teacher readiness, but also actually having teachers there. So I'd like to ask a question, and I'll begin with you, Mike. If there was a 10-year-old child listening to this conversation, what promise would we make? And I would like us to go, across the panel. What kind of promise would we make to this 10-year-old child listening to this conversation about how education might look like in the future? Mike.
Thank you so much, Polycarp. A 10-year-old listening to this discussion today will know that much of what has been covered is about the future, especially in IT or tech, or improving the standards of our living conditions in Africa, but that starts with education. So a 10-year-old will have to be maybe given resources, but also be guided. Okay, this is where we are going, and this is what we have to do. As a parent, I'll make sure with my 10-year-old that I get at least the resources I need for my child to go, so that they can achieve the goal in 10 years. But I'll also look into schools that are in line with the 10-year program that maybe we need for this, for this child. If not, then we're gonna be letting the child to search for themselves. Now it comes back to us as parents, as teachers, as the community. Make sure we provide resources and skills to impact these 10-year-old. Thank you so
much. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Over to you, Oumah. Oumah? Can you hear me, Oumah? Okay, we'll have Oumah back. Benson, any promise you would make to a 10-year-old kid listening to this conversation?
Okay. Without over-promising, I would want to tell the 10-year-old that, first of all, we are going to design curriculum that allows you to express your agency and for your voice to be heard and for you to engage with other 10-year-olds in a way that feels that you are valued as a person, as a young person who is growing up. That's something that I would want to promise, especially coming from the IB. The other thing I want to promise the 10-year-old is that we are going to look for you, look for your kind of school where you are schooling or the school system that you are in, and make sure that we share with you, we share with your teachers, we share with your school leaders, quality education, and element of a good and future-ready kind of education, so that we make sure that you are not left behind simply because of where you come from in terms of region, socioeconomic status or class, that we are going to accommodate and include you into the school. Yeah.
Thanks, Benson. Thank you. Jackie?
I just want to begin by saying to the 10-year-old that the education or schooling will allow doors to open for you, but it is your character that will keep those doors open. You should be allowed to fail forward. You should be allowed to become creative, create those prototypes. Come on, you've got what it takes. You should be able to agree to disagree. No one person is better than another. You should be able to question assumptions. You should be able to revise your opinions. Do not have fixed mindsets. You should be able to collaborate across difference, because the person with whom you interact today will be the person you need for tomorrow. The goal is not certainty, it is intellectual humility. So always be humble, and the world will be at your beck and call.
Thanks. Help us wind up the.
I think you're breaking up a bit, Polycarp. Can you? You might.
For you.
Yes. Yes. We can't hear you. You're mute. You're back to mute, Polycarp. We didn't hear you. Okay, now speak. Your mic is off mute.
Sure.
Okay. As you're fixing that, let me read what's come in. This has been in response to some of the things the panel was saying. Sally again, well, thanks, Sally. International partnerships can be valuable when they're structured to strengthen local capacity. In African schools, the priority is often teacher development, curriculum relevance, and the next one here, and equitable access to resources. Globalization of education should therefore be approached as reciprocal exchange, where international institutions contribute expertise while also learning from local. Someone spoke to that. Was that you, Dr. Kairu? Or was that you, Jack? Was it everybody? I mean, I think you all talked about that. This balance ensures that global citizenship is not imposed, but cultivated in ways that reflect community realities. Yeah, I think Sally may be an educator as well. She sounds like she's one, I think. Yeah, but anyway, Sally, thanks for that comment. Let me see if there's anything else here. Another bonjour. This is awesome. Thank you for the insights to my questions. I think she was responding to those who answered her questions. Was there anything else? I think the same person saying what? Okay, or some people. These are educators. We don't say "or some people" with all these exclamation marks. My generation, we would not have typed this way in my generation. But anyway, tuned in from that must be some Bahrain. Looking forward to this amazing conversation. My father always says, "Little knowledge is dangerous." I'm here to learn and engage. Okay, so those I suppose are some of the people that have commented today. I wonder where Polycarp went. I think he dropped off at some point. But anyway, we're winding, because I wanted to ask him that question about the 10-year-old question. That 10-year-old question, we needed to get his, feedback, but it's all good. But I want to say thank you so very much to you, Jackie, Dr. Kairu, and Mike, and Polycarp, and Oumah. Thank you so much for being part of the African Conversation on Education today. We appreciate your input, insights, experience, examples, the templates. You have shared such wisdom. I actually wrote down some notes. The words that kept coming up: collaboration, community, working together, alignment, culture, and a really strong one, identity. And this actually, Dr. Kairu said, what is our African identity? Like, we need to be anchored and rooted in that. So there's nothing wrong with that. But those are really, really powerful, really, really powerful things to consider or to think about for anyone who's going to be watching this after we drop off. But thank you for your presence here. So appreciated. And
Thank you.
And to those watching, thank you as well for making time. And join us again next week for another African conversation. I do not know yet what we shall be talking about. It could be an extension of education, who knows? But just connect with us on our social media platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And until then, stay well, stay focused. God bless all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so very much.